So good morning, good afternoon, good evening everyone, and welcome to the Scuba Species YouTube channel. And actually this is our first ever video, so hopefully it goes okay. But today what we're going to be talking about is 6 simple steps that you can take to start your scuba diving journey. So first off, if you're new here, then hi, my name is Katie, and on Sundays I sit down and I talk about all the different ways that you can improve your skills and your knowledge in diving. Now if that sounds like something that you might be interested in, then I would highly recommend you hit the subscribe button, and also you can check out our blog and our Instagram where you can see more of what we're doing in our everyday lives. But enough of the rambling and let's just get into it. So you've probably seen all the brochures and the videos of people floating around underwater without a care in the world, looking at amazing marine life and having the time of their lives. But how do you get there? Well, most of you guys know that you will need to take some sort of scuba diving class, and that does mean that you're going to need to be taught by an instructor. It's not something that you can teach yourself, unfortunately, or rather fortunately. And in order to do this, we're going to need to take a few different steps. So what are they? Well, step number 1 is making sure that you meet the physical requirements. Now, it's no secret that diving is a physically demanding sport. However, there are actually more specific questions that you need to ask yourself before you can actually sign up. And the first question you need to ask yourself is, can you swim? Now, it may seem a little bit obvious to some that swimming and diving sort of go hand in hand. However, you'd be surprised the amount of people we get up signing for their first ever diving classes and they have no idea how to swim. Now, the reason I say you will need to know how to swim for those people is that there are actually some requirements to passing entry-level qualifications in diving, and these are the swim tests. Now for PADI, the swim tests are a 200-meter swim, or if you're not comfortable with just doing it without equipment, you can also do a 300-meter swim with mask, fins and snorkel. And then you will also need to do a 10-minute float. Now far from being there to test your technique and your skill, they are purely so that the instructors can see that you can stay safe and that you can also stay comfortable in the water. There's nothing like the thought of drowning that's going to put a damper on your first class. So if you can't swim already, then I really highly suggest you walk before you can run, swim before you can dive. Go out, get a bit more comfortable in the water, maybe take a few swimming lessons, and it's really going to help your chances when you go and get your scuba certification. The other question you need to ask yourself is, do you meet the medical requirements? Now, in order to sign up for any scuba diving class, you will need to sign a medical declaration. Now, what this basically is a list of statements with a yes or no answer. For example, are you pregnant? Yes or no? Have you ever had a heart condition? Yes or no? And so forth. Now, if you are a very fit person and always have been, then this form should not even be a worry for you. You don't have to think about it until the very day. However, if you have had or maybe still have some health conditions, then and you can sign yes to any of these questions, then you may have to do a little bit more preparation before you can actually go and get in the water. So what you're going to have to do if you sign yes to any of these questions is actually go and get signed off by a doctor. Now this, if you are maybe going to do dive education abroad, this is a lot easier to do from home. First of all, you probably already have a doctor set up, a GP or someone that you personally know, and this is first of all going to make it a lot easier. Also, it's probably going to make it a little bit more cost efficient and may also be a bit more reliable depending on the destination that you're going to. For me, this medical declaration was a bit of a surprise. So when I got to signing up for my open water class, I was told that I needed to go and get signed off because I had asthma when I was a kid. So just before my class, I had to go trek around trying to find a doctor. And then when I did find one, they basically tapped on my chest, signed me off and said I was okay. Now for me, this was great because it meant I could go and get in the water straight away. However, probably not the best thing that I could have done. So if this is you, then definitely go get signed off before you go learn to dive. Also, the best way that you can figure out if you are one of the people who need to go see a doctor or not is to just check out the medical form. So I will leave it linked in the description below. Now, the second step after you have made sure that you are fit to dive is the fun part, choosing your course. Now, what most people don't know is there are actually a few different ways that you can actually get into scuba diving. Open water is the most popular choice, however, it's not the only one. So the first and most basic thing that you can do is a Discover Scuba Dive, or DSD as it's known, which is basically a dive experience where you do a few skills and you learn a little bit of basic dive theory with an instructor, and then they will take you out for a short dive, either in confined water, so like a pool, or even open water like open ocean. Now, this can be really good for people who are really short on time because it only takes about half a day, maybe a day max to do. And also once you have done the skills and the theory with the instructor, you can carry on doing these dive experiences as long as it's with the same school. Now, during these dive experiences, the instructor will look after your every need basically, and they will check your air and make sure that you are safe. And to do this, you will need to stay quite close to them. You're also limited to a maximum depth of about 12 meters. Now, moving on from DSD and onto an actual qualification, and that is scuba diver. So scuba diver is actually part of the open water course. So all of the skills that you do are exactly the same as open water. The only difference is it's much, much less. So about half basically. And what you do for scuba diver is, again, you're going to have to do a bit of theory, you're going to have to do a few skill circuits, and then again you can do 2 open water training dives. Now, the difference between DSD and scuba diver is that you actually get a certification out of it, which means that once you have passed all of these sections and you get signed off, it means you can actually go out diving. However, the limits are that you must go diving with a professional and that you are limited to depths of 12 meters. But what this does mean is that you can now sign up for fun dives if you want to. And it doesn't necessarily have to be with the same school. You can sign up for fun dives with different schools. You just have a few limits, as you do in any of the certifications anyway, so I don't know what I'm talking about. But then we have the most popular choice, and that is the open water course. Now, for the open water course, there are 5 sections of theory, 5 skill circuits that you need to complete, and then you get to do 4 open water training dives. Now, after you have completed all of these and you get signed off and certified, then you will be able to dive with a buddy, so not necessarily a dive professional and not on your own, and you can dive to depths of 18 meters. Now, the reason why I'm telling you all these different things is because, like I said, not a lot of people know that there are actually different choices. And to some, one choice may actually be a lot more beneficial than the other. For example, if you don't know yet if diving is going to be something that you really, really love, or maybe you don't want to invest the time and the money, it means you can maybe take a DSD or maybe even a scuba diver and get a bit of a taste for the sport before you actually go the full way. However, if you do think that it is something you're going to love and you are ready to invest the time and the money, then maybe you can just jump in straight with an open water and get the qualification. Either way, there are lots of different choices here and you can make the best one depending on your circumstances. Another really good thing about how the agencies organise these courses is that the skills are transferable. So the skills that you learn in the DSD and in the scuba diver and in the open water are all the same skills, it's just different amounts of them. So if you really want to, you can take the DSD, and the DSD skills and experience that you do can count to your open water class, and the same for scuba diver. However, once we go down this path, it does start getting a little bit more, not complicated, but it means there's a bit more integration. So the best thing that you can do is, if you haven't your heart set on a dive centre already, then contact them and see what their policies are and what they're willing to go with and how they set up their dive courses. Once you've completed step 1 and 2, you can then move on to step number 3, and that is choosing your location. Now, you can pretty much dive on every single continent on this planet and in almost every water system, which means that water conditions like light and visibility and water temperature, they're all going to vary a lot from place to place. So the first question you want to ask yourself is, what sort of water conditions do you prefer? Now, generally speaking, north of the equator, waters tend to be cooler and visibility also tends to be a lot worse. And these conditions can be quite challenging if you are a beginner. However, on the plus side, if you do decide to learn in these conditions, it could mean that your skill set, once you qualify, is a lot more than maybe someone who has only learnt to dive in warmer waters. Now, speaking of warmer waters, anywhere south of the equator, waters generally tend to be warmer. Visibility also tends to be a lot better. However, it can vary seasonally and also place to place. So, due to the ease and the comfort of diving in warm waters and also the warm air that generally goes with them, a lot of people do decide that warmer destinations, warmer waters are the choice for them, and because of this there are actually a lot more choice in dive centres around these locations. Another question that you need to ask yourself when you are choosing a location is also, what sort of water system is it going to be? Now, every different location has different kinds of water systems. So it could be open ocean that you're learning to dive in, it could be a quarry, it could be a lake, or it could even be a cavern. So these can all greatly impact the environment that you're learning in, so it's another thing that you should think about. Attractions are also things that come up a lot when someone is determining what location they want to dive in. Obviously, this is your first time underwater, you want to see that big, amazing marine life, amazing underwater landscapes, and all those cool wrecks. However, what I want to say here is that for beginner divers, this really shouldn't be as big a deal as you want it to be, unfortunately. A lot of the time when you're learning to dive, you're going to be spending more time learning and focusing on the skills than you're actually going to get to maybe explore or see a lot of the underwater world. Also, in a lot of places where there are specific attractions, they may have limits on the qualifications you need to dive those sites, or maybe even the experience you need to dive those sites. For example, a wreck, if there's a specific wreck that you want to see and it sits in a certain meters or feet of water and you are not qualified to go to those depths, then you are not going to be able to go and see them even if you go to that specific location and you get your training. Now, if you are staying longer in that location and you are furthering your dive training and continue to gain experience, then yeah, go for it. Go for the locations that you think are going to be amazing and are bucket list destination for you. However, if you are going somewhere just to get certified and just to learn how to dive, then this really shouldn't be a big a deal as you want it to be. The fourth and final thing to consider when it comes to location is the cost. Now, generally speaking, places like Southeast Asia, North America, these all tend to be a lot more budget friendly. And this is basically because they contain a lot of developing countries where prices for staff and wages and general running costs are quite low, which means they can keep the overall prices of their courses and of their diving also quite low. And this is the same reason why diving in places like North America or maybe Europe are more expensive. Wages tend to be more expensive here, and so do general running costs, which increases the prices. Now, because of this, a lot of people who live in maybe more expensive places to learn how to dive, they will actually choose to travel to a destination and get certified there. Now, if you are going to do this, you should also consider that you're going to have to pay flights and also accommodation on top of this. However, you could make it into a holiday and have a bit of a diving holiday where you also get certified. Now, if you are okay with the prices in your local area, maybe they suit your budget, then another option is for you to actually get certified locally. And this can actually be a really, really good option, because as we are talking about before with the attractions, you can spend your time maybe diving in the less well-known areas, getting used to actually diving itself, and then when you do go on holiday, you can spend the whole time fun diving. You don't have to focus on the certification part. It also means that when you are getting your education, you can be a bit more flexible, so you can take your classes maybe on the weekends as opposed to in one big chunk. Another big positive of this is if you want to carry on your dive education, or maybe you have some questions down the road or some skills that you need help with, you can go back quite easily to the dive centre that you've done your initial training with, and they can help you out along the way. This ties in quite nicely with step number 4, and that's choosing your dive operation. Now, if you already have your heart set on a dive centre or a dive operation and you love the way they teach, they really speak to you, you have a really good connection, then by all means for it, go for them. And if that's the case, then you can probably scrap all of step 3, because wherever that dive centre is, then that is where you're gonna go. However, if you have maybe not decided on a dive centre yet, but you have the location and you're wondering exactly how you can choose the best one for you, there are again a few things that you can consider. And the first one, of course, again, is the cost. So aside from the overall cost or the general cost of the area that you're going to, each dive centre or dive school is going to have a different cost or a different price for each of their courses, some being cheaper and some being relatively expensive. Now, I cannot stress enough here how important it is not to necessarily go for the cheapest option. Cheapest is not always the best. After all, the phrase "you get what you pay for" can come true a lot of the time in these cases, especially if you're going to places which maybe aren't as highly regulated. The last thing you want to do is throw your life into the hands of some cowboy divers who aren't paid very well and don't really care about your well-being. A good dive centre will know the value of what they're selling, they will know the value of their staff and the whole running costs, and their prices will reflect this. That being said, it doesn't also necessarily mean they're the most expensive ones. A lot of the time in the dive industry, when you're paying for more expensive courses, you're not just paying for good training, you're also paying all the additional luxuries, like the facilities that you're going to get to learn in, the boats that you're learning on, and all the added extra bits like a face towel to wipe your face, wipe the salt off your face once you come up from diving. Whilst we're on the topic of added extras, another thing that you could think about is what exactly the course includes. So a lot of prices, or some prices I should say, state a basic fee for basic training, and then they will charge extra for things like the certification fee, the manuals, or the e-learning, or maybe even equipment rental, whereas other places they will include all of these costs all under the final price. And it's a good idea to find out what kind of dive centre you are getting into before you actually pay the price, and then you find out there are some little surprises down the road. And while you're at it, also find out what their prices are for any extra days of training, because the general costs that they state for example, for an open water course, these are set for a certain number of days. So the average amount of days it takes most divers to complete the course. However, if you are maybe struggling or you need a few extra days, then the likelihood is you're probably going to be charged for a few extra days of training. So it's a good idea to make sure you know the cost of this before you go and sign up. Now, another thing to consider when you are choosing a dive operation is their resources. Now, this means things like their equipments and their manuals and stuff like that. Now, I'm not saying here that old equipment is necessarily bad. In fact, it's perfectly fine as long as they get it serviced regularly and that it's maintained and that it works. Some of the dodgiest places that I have worked for all had bad equipment in common. Okay, so you can ask them as a beginner how often they get their gear serviced, things like that. Also check out the reviews and see what people are saying about their equipment and their resources. Also, while you're at it, in the equipment department, check that they stock your sizes, because especially if you're diving in colder waters and you're going to need more equipment, you want to know that there are going to be sizes that fit you. There's nothing worse than learning to dive in a fins or BCD or wetsuit that is way too big or way too small for you. So check that they stock your sizes before you go. Okay, so bear with me guys, because step number 4 is a long one, but it's also an important one. And so what you can also ask, or what also determines what dive operation you're going to go with, is how they structure their courses. So a few things to consider are, one, for example, if you're going to have the same instructor for the entire course. Now, having the same instructor can make your transition from each section a lot more seamless. It also means you can both build relationships with each other, they will know your learning type, and you can build up a bit more trust and understanding, and generally speaking, the experience flows a bit better. You can also ask if you are going to have any choice in who your instructor is going to be, and also what language the course is going to be taught in, because some centres will only teach the courses that their instructors can speak or that they have resources for. So this is another important thing to consider. While you're at it, also ask them how big their class sizes are. So for open water, maximum class size is 8 students to 1 instructor, and this is quite big. And bigger classes are generally common of cheaper operations who want to churn through a few more students to try and make up the prices basically. However, that doesn't necessarily mean it's a bad thing. What it does mean is that you're probably going to be waiting around a little bit more. You're probably going to have less one-on-one time with the instructor, and there also might be a little bit more pressure to get through the skills a bit faster because there's more people to get through. Now, in confined water, when you're doing your skills, this is probably not even going to be an issue at all. The only place you're probably going to see a really big difference is maybe in the open water section, where your instructor is going to have to spend more time going through skills with more people, and you're probably going to have maybe a bit less time to actually explore the underwater environment. So ideally, what most instructors say, or at least in my opinion, is that the ideal class size for open water at least is 4 students to 1 instructor. So the last thing that you consider when it comes to the dive operation is the agency. So these are the guys who are going to be handing out these certifications and are also in control of the training and the training materials. So most common or famous examples are PADI, probably heard of them, SSI, SDI, CMAS, BSAC, GUE, and the list goes on. There are lots of them. However, there are slight differences between each agency. For example, how they do their training, their requirements for their training, and also the fees that they charge, which could have a small influence on the overall price of the course. However, at this point, I really don't think that it's something that you need to worry about. In fact, most dive agencies have really good safety records and have really good training standards, so there's really not going to be that much different agency to agency at this point at beginner level. The biggest place where it starts to make a difference is actually when you start getting into professional diving, so a long way from where you are right now, okay? So like I said, you don't have to worry about it, and also if you choose to go with one operation who dives with one certain agency and you get certified with them, and then you decide to go somewhere else in the future and they maybe use a different agency, it's not going to be a problem either. All or most courses at least are compatible with each other, which means if you take an open water with one dive agency and then you want to move on to the next level, you can do it with another agency with the skills and certification you've acquired from your previous training. So again, it's not a problem. Now you're probably thinking, that must be it, right? You have met the physical requirements, you have chosen your course, you've chosen your dive location, you have chosen your dive operation. What more could there be? Well, these last 2 steps are here to make sure that when you finally do get in the water, you are as comfortable as you can be. So step number 5 is investing in gear. Now I'm going to keep it simple and short at this point because like it is, you are a beginner watching this video, you are not going to need to invest in the full set of gear. In fact, most open water classes that I know, they include equipment rental either in the course price or as an added extra, so there will be an option for it. Now that being said, I do think there are certain pieces of equipment that will make a huge difference to your first experience in the water, and that is a mask and fins. these equipment can also be very handily used for snorkeling. And now step number 6 then is also choosing your dive theory. Now there are actually a few different types of dive theory, and one is a manual and another is e-learning. Now if you're choosing a manual, then again, like the health form, you're not going to have to worry about this until you actually go to start learning your course, because an instructor will actually go through it with you. However, if you are choosing e-learning, it is something that you are going to have to complete before you can do any in-water training. So it is a little bit more down to you. However, this can be a good thing maybe if you are short on time and you want to do the theory beforehand, or even if you want a bit of extra time to kind of process everything, then e-learning could be the way to go. But if you do choose this, like I said, make sure that you have it ready for when you actually go to complete your course. So your first dive can really make or break your dive career. A good one is gonna make you want to carry on doing it, and a bad one is probably gonna make you want to quit. So that's why it's so important that you try and set yourself up for success, and I hope these 6 steps will help you do that. So if you've liked this video, please give it a thumbs up. If you want to see more, hit that subscribe button and comment for any content you would like to see more of from us. And that's it for today, guys. I'll see you guys later.